Hello again, internet friends, and welcome back to another episode of the MTV Music Video Awards. I'm your host, Gwen Stefani. This week I want to talk to you guys about a subject that drives me a little bit crazy, but it's important to talk about because people always have questions about it, and it's something that's always a subject of debate on the interwebs, and that is the effectiveness of some exercises versus others, and the likelihood that one exercise is going to get you injured more so than another. And this video is kind of inspired by a coach who I keep seeing in my social media feed. He has a pretty substantial following, but just out of politeness, I won't mention his name, and more realistically, because he has a pretty big following, and the last thing I want somebody to do is find out I was criticizing them online and then fat shame me on the internet or something. But we won't mention his name, but to give you kind of an idea of what he posts on his page and why it frustrates me a little bit, he will post a video of some type of training modality or exercise, and he will essentially give a laundry list of reasons as to why he thinks that exercise is either not effective or catastrophically dangerous or going to lead to injury after a long period of time, or a combination of those three. So I want to give you guys a couple of thoughts that I think will help you sift through these types of statements the next time you're online and trying to decide what's true and what's not, what's useful and what's not. And to do that, we're going to kind of break down one example that he gave a couple of months back. He posted a picture of a conventional deadlift and gave 2 or 3 reasons as to why that exercise was dangerous, it was not good, you shouldn't do it, it's ineffective, all these different things. And then he proposed the exercise that he likes as the alternative. And to give you a visual of this exercise, it was him doing a kettlebell swing, but he was not swinging it back and forth in between his legs like you've probably seen. He was swinging it in a twisting motion from the right hand to the left hand and switching hands in the middle of the movement. So he's twisting and switching hands, and while he's doing that, he's switching stances and stepping forward almost like a half range of motion walking lunge. So it's a very unconventional movement, and it's almost reminiscent of a dance move in the sense that it's a very fluid motion, the whole body's involved, he's moving forward while he's twisting, while he's switching hands. So there's kind of a lot going on with this movement relative to the deadlift where you're just going up and down. And so I'm not going to get into why he says he thinks it's more effective, because he uses a lot of fancy scientific jargon that I'm too dumb to understand, and he could just be making it up anyway. I didn't go to college, so I wouldn't know. But let's break down these two movements and see what they offer us and see if one is more beneficial than the other. Let's first think of the deadlift. What are we getting? We know that the deadlift allows us to handle a lot of weight. Even a relatively untrained person can handle 100, 200, 400 pounds with not that much training time. And so that's a tremendous amount of stimulus that you're giving the body. And we're also stimulating the body through its entire posterior chain. So you're not just working, say, the upper body, you're working the hands, the arms, the upper back, the lower back, the glutes, the hamstrings. It's very much a full body movement, and so you're getting this huge stimulus throughout a very large portion of your body. Technically, it's not your entire body, but it's a lot of different muscle groups all at the same time, and they're lifting a tremendous amount of weight. And so the stimulus you get from that is very, very effective in making you stronger, because it's not very common that you encounter things in your daily life where you could handle 200 or 300 pounds on a regular basis, but because of the way the bar is positioned in your hands, how close you can get it to your body, it allows you to handle a lot more weight more consistently, as opposed to handling a more odd object through a more unorthodox range of motion like the one he is suggesting. And so the deadlift has its benefits there. Big strength stimulus, a lot of different muscle groups being used at once, not to mention there are muscle groups that you use every single day, your hands, your lower back, and so on. Now let's think about his exercise. I believe in the video that he was demonstrating he was using anywhere from 30 to 50 pounds. So relative to the conventional deadlift, it's very light, but he was twisting, which is not a movement that you're doing in the deadlift. And if you tried to twist in the deadlift, the likelihood that you would run into a problem is pretty high, not necessarily because twisting is bad for you, but because you're twisting with a tremendous amount of weight. On top of that, he's switching hands, so there's a little coordination involved, which is good. We know we want more coordination generally. And he's also switching stances as he lunges forward, so there's a balance element to this, and a coordination not just with the hands, but with the feet. And so in addition to getting yourself a little bit stronger and more mobile through that twisting range of motion, which can be a problem if that range of motion is neglected and you're just doing sagittal plane lifts like the squat and deadlift and you're just going up and down. In addition to getting that twisting motion going with the body, he's also working on coordination, dexterity, stuff like that. And there's probably a little bit of a conditioning element to it, although not a ton. And so, is either one of these exercises wrong? No. Are you going to blow out your back bending over and picking something up? Of course not. People bend over and pick things up all the time, and it's fine. What makes the deadlift so effective but also so dangerous is that you can handle so much weight with it. That's why we hear guys like Robert Oberhurst, who was a world-class strongman, say the deadlift's not worth it. Now, I don't agree with that, but I get the point that he's trying to make, which is that you can handle so much weight on there, the likelihood that you're going to jack yourself up is pretty high, as opposed to this exercise that we're talking about, this twisting kettlebell, where you're only handling 20 to 35 pounds. So the likelihood that you're going to hurt yourself because you're not moderating intensity properly is going to be a lot lower. But if we look at the twisting kettlebell movement that this coach was suggesting, are you going to get that strong if you're lifting 40 pounds and you're twisting it while you're moving forward? I've seen guys who are really, really strong with kettlebells. They make kettlebells their like lifting style for decades. They do get really strong, but ultimately they only end up using 100, 200 pounds sometimes at the most. And because of the implement itself, but also the movement pattern where you've got it swaying back and forth in a less stable position, which is even more so true with this guy's kettlebell swing because he's twisting and shifting stances and all this, you just can't handle the same amount of weight. And this is even more so true for a beginner who maybe their balance isn't that great. So trying to turn while switching stances, they might be able to do it, but they're not going to be able to do that much weight with it. But like I said before, you don't want to neglect that twisting motion. I was listening to a podcast years ago where this world champion powerlifter who had squatted 900 pounds hurt his back golfing because he hadn't done that twisting motion in years. He hadn't gone golfing, and so he twisted and really tried to twist into his swing, and he strained his back because his body was so unaccustomed to that twisting motion, and it was so tight and accustomed to the heavy squatting and going up and down that he was using, he essentially had no mobility through that plane of motion. So is twisting bad for us? No, of course not. People play golf all the time. Old people golf all the time, well into their 60s, 70s, and 80s. So clearly it's not the twisting motion itself that was the problem. It was this very elite level power lifter who had gotten so stiff and rigid in this one position, which was important and necessary for his sport. You can't squat 900 pounds without being stiff and rigid. But he eventually hit a rate of diminishing returns, or rather the point of diminishing returns with that stiffness and rigidity, to now where he couldn't even swing a golf club without hurting himself. So the twisting movement in and of itself is not the problem. We see old people play golf well into their 80s all the time. They're twisting, they're turning all day, every day, and they're perfectly fine. So when you're looking at these exercises, don't look at them as right or wrong. And it's the same thing with any type of movement pattern. don't look at it as right or wrong or more or less dangerous. Ask yourself, is my body prepared to handle the demand of this movement? And is this exercise or the load or the movement pattern going to get me the training stimulus that I'm looking for? And so for me and the majority of the people that I work with, and I think just the majority of people in general, they need to get stronger. They need to put more muscle mass on them. And there's a wide variety of movements that we can use to accomplish that. But if we want to talk very effective movements, I'm going to have them use traditional barbell lifts where they can handle 100, 200, 300 pounds. Because guess what? If you get good at that conventional deadlift and you can deadlift 315 pounds, it's not going to be a big deal for you to go and learn that alternating stance kettlebell swing where you're swinging 25 pounds from side to side, because your body is accustomed to handling 300 pounds. And something that you guys should also remember is that you can do both. Do your deadlift, and then if for whatever reason you like or think that these more unconventional movements are going to be helpful, do them. Just do them at the same time. Do them together. As long as it's within a volume and range of motion and intensity range that your body can handle. And that's ultimately the most important thing, so that we can just look at these exercises like what they are, which is tools, instead of right or wrong answers to some type of moral question. Thank you guys for listening, and I will see you next time.